Welcome everyone and welcome to another episode of the Business Hour here on Unity FM. I'm your host Umar Rashid, and before I introduce my guest today, just a reminder that this is the show where we talk about all things business. So whether you're an entrepreneur, a business owner that's looking to start up, or a business owner that's been in business for a while and just wanting to get tips, guidance, wanting to know some stories, inspiration from other business owners and business professionals, and this is the show for you. Now, if you've not had a chance to listen to the shows previously, you can now do so by visiting the Unity FM website, or alternatively you can visit my YouTube channel at Umar Rashid HR. You can also connect with me, follow with me on other online social media platforms such as Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. Again, the handle for all of those is at Umar Rashid HR. Now, today's guest is a fellow Brummie. He's born and bred in Birmingham. He's qualified in graphic design and visual marketing. He's also been trained in public speaking, and he's taken those skills on to his own radio show called The Zoh Show as well. And today we have brother Zoheb Sadiq, aka Zoh. Zoh, assalamu alaikum, bro.
Yeah, walaikum assalam, Umar. Yeah.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
No. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for, coming on, showing and sharing your journey and expertise. Firstly, how are you? I saw you on the weekend at the local football team, and unfortunately wasn't the result that you was looking for.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Being a Blues fan, Birmingham City fan, it was a bit of a painful experience, having supported them all my life, and always seems to be a difficult one at the moment when you're going to matches and you end up on the losing side. But it's just part and parcel of being a local fan, and I suppose we go again, don't we, on the weekend? So
sure, all Aston Villa fans listening on are just booing at the radio as you were saying that. So listen, as I introduced you, qualified in graphic design and visual marketing. Was that something that was of interest to you? How did that come about? Was it that you went to university and you thought, yeah, this is what I want to be, or did it kind of come to you through chance?
It sort of stemmed from a young age, really. So I was always interested in visual marketing, design. When I was younger, it was something that I kind of knew that there was. I knew that there was a talent that was almost. That it was there amongst the other subjects. I always found art, design, product design, creative subjects to be something that was just of interest to me. I kept sort of noticing that I was getting better grades in those subjects than the ones that you typically expect from, like, English, math, science and stuff. Those subjects never really appealed to me in the sense of a long-term career or anything like that. I mean, I don't think you'd really know much about career at a young age, but at the same time I just noticed that the creative subjects were just stuck out to me, and all of a sudden I just thought, wow, I'm pretty good at this. And then you start noticing you're getting A's and B's and those sort of subjects, and then it's like, and a little bit I've got to credit my brother, who obviously as well. It's like my brother, like, he was good at art and design, and I think the more I saw him do it, the more I thought, yeah, I want to do this as well. So there's a bit of influence from there. But I think the more I noticed that positivity and progress in those subjects, I thought, right, well, I want to pursue this now. No matter what my parents said, no matter what relatives said or friends said, So did you get a bit of, let's say, fallback? Or, yeah, because I suppose, growing up in a Pakistani Muslim family, if you want to be stereotypical, graphic design or artwork or branding isn't what you would normally expect a son of the family to do. Stereotypically, my dad pushed me to be an accountant. Never happened, but we kind of get pushed into certain professions. So how did you have any sort of resistance from your family? All the time. All the time. Every time I had a progress report, every time I had some kind of parents' evening, or if I was doing well at graphic design or they call it product design. The module was called at school, or art and design. So whenever I thought I was excelling in those subjects, my parents or my family, they didn't really notice. They used to overlook it because they thought, oh well, he's doing well in the subjects that don't matter.
Yeah,
which
maths,
was
English, science. What you're doing there?
Yeah, which was almost like it was a bit difficult to handle at times because I was thinking, well, do you know what? I'm good at this, and it's like, and I felt proud that I was doing well in something rather than doing well at everything or doing well at nothing. I was at least focusing on one area which I thought I was pretty good at, but. It's one of those, isn't it? It's like, I think there's always going to be that stereotypical ideology or kind of opinions of family or the people. And so I suppose really I had to challenge it. I had to go against the status quo. I had to, break tradition in some ways and really, really just had to believe in myself that this was the right decision, this was the right path. And, yeah, I mean, by no means has it been easy. By no means has it been a smooth ride, But I look back on it and, I wouldn't change it for the world.
No regrets.
Nah, no regrets whatsoever. And like I said, hopefully, as I'm sharing this story tonight, it can inspire people to, to hopefully take some positive action as well.
It's interesting because my daughter, she's 13, and she's similar to you in the sense of she's okay with English, math, science. But she does love art, and she's very, very creative with her artwork. And I'm having those conversations with her about, look, what is it that you want to do? Why don't you be? It's varied from why don't you be an architect? Because again, element of drawing. What about graphic design? What about? And she's still hesitant, like I don't know, sort of thing. So it's interesting because when we grew up, I suppose social media, graphic design, websites, all of that, which is visual, it wasn't as ripe as it is now, and no one would, you're thinking back then, you wouldn't be thinking about, I'm going to be a social media manager, social media specialist, or graphic design or branding sort of thing. Whereas now, the generation our kids are going to be growing up in, it's very rife, is it? And someone now saying, okay, I want to do this, you probably won't get as much resistance as you've probably experienced.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I do have to say that during my upbringing, it was all of these sort of subjects were kind of rolled into one, particularly at uni, where they kind of titled it, or they had it under an umbrella of visual communication.
Yeah.
So visual communication consisted of graphic design, illustration, moving image, animation, the more kind of artistic side of things. So illustration being one of them. So and a funny story here, actually, when I went to uni, I actually applied for illustration, and the interview of the uni that I went to, University of Gloucestershire in Cheltenham, they actually turned around during the interview and said, "Do you know something? We don't think you're right for this course," and my heart sank because I thought, okay,
you actually got interviewed for a course to go on a course.
Yeah, yeah. No. Well, yes, you have interviews to showcase your portfolio and to demonstrate your skills.
I don't know. I never had to go through that. Is it for a creative? Because it was more of a creative course. I went for a business course.
So you had to showcase your portfolio. You had to showcase your skills. They wanted to see, what's the breadth of your work? What have you done? What skill sets have you got? But during the interview, the actual the person who was speaking to me said, "Do you know what? We don't think you're right for this course." And then initially, I just thought, oh my god, right, that's it. That's the end of it. Back on the train home, okay, right, move on to the next interview. But what he said was, we're going to introduce you to the graphic design tutors. And so he said to me, right, get your portfolio together, walk you down the hallway, and my two tutors, John and Adam, eventually, they saw to me and they were like, yeah, come in, let's have a chat. And they were like, yeah, okay, we do actually think this is more graphic design related, and okay.
Oh, so they saw your portfolio, and thought that actually
you're more suited to this
graphic design. Yeah.
And I was thinking, and all of a sudden it completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
And it was really unexpected because I thought, wow, okay, I've had illustration in my mind for all this time, so maybe I didn't know what I wanted either. So all of a sudden, I'm then going back to my tutors at my art college at the time, and I'm saying, this is what they said. I'm telling my family, okay, even though my family may not have understood it, I was still telling them,
Yeah.
this is what they said. And luckily, my brother was like, okay, right, that's what they were saying, go for it. And then I took a leap of faith, and I was like, right, graphic design, that's it. And all of a sudden, everything changed in that moment. So actually, if that hadn't happened, I don't know where my career could have gone. I may have been pursuing something like illustration, which, even though it's similar to graphic design, it may have been an even harder path, or I may have just given up and not done it at all. So I think it's funny, like, in these moments when you get feedback and you get constructive criticism or you get guidance, you've got to take it, and that's the one thing I did.
And that's the thing, it's a mindset, isn't it? You either take it as a positive, or like you said, you could have,
or you let it
crumble. You could have
you let it kind of affect you, and you just give up.
You know, one thing with graphic design, though, is with a business, the first thing that they will probably say is, look, I need a logo. Then after that, they'll probably say, okay, I'm going to create a website. I need some imagery or artwork with to go on the website. Then it goes forward to say, okay, look, on my social media, I'm going to need XYZ content. I'm going to need this sort of stuff. Slowly, that business is creating a brand, isn't it? And that's where, from graphic design, you've kind of, or there's an element of branding that has it as well. And I just want you to kind of explain, what is branding? When we talk about branding, what is that? And I suppose what I'm keen to understand is how I think the world's evolved a little bit with, when we grow up with brand, people will say, they will just name big brands that we know, Nike, Adidas. Growing up, Nike, Adidas, Rockport was the main ones when we were growing. But now we've kind of seen, when it comes to branding, is this personal branding, is people branding sort of stuff. So it's evolved, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm going to kind of reverse engineer this. So you mentioned big brands, you mentioned like the Cokes, McDonald's, Adidas, Nike, whatever. So there's a reason why we attach ourselves to these brands, and there's a reason why we remain loyal, because essentially what these brands are doing is they are setting characteristics and attributes amongst themselves and values that we're essentially aligning to. So a brand is, I'd say, it's you got to think of it as almost like an entity that evolves over time. And it's funny when people have said to me in the past, like, when I've done freelance work, or when I was learning branding and stuff, or people, or even now, people say to me like, oh, how much would you charge to create a brand, for me, or what about if you worked on my branding? And that, it's such a deep question. It's almost like, well, how long's the cliche of, how long is a piece of string? Yeah. But then it's like, well, you really, really have to sit down and understand what a brand is first. So if you're asking me what branding is, well, branding is, as I said, it is something that evolves over time. A logo is barely scratching the surface. So for any new business owners that listen to this, or if you are a business owner already, it's like your logo is not the brand. So when people say to me, well, I've done my logo and that's the brand, I'm like, well, that isn't the brand whatsoever. It's how you apply, so what
the
is
logo. If the logo is not,
it's an element.
It's an element of the brand.
It's an element of the brand, but it's.
Would you not call it the starting point of
a
brand?
Visual. I look at a logo as being a visual mark or representation of your company. And a logo is massively important. Don't get me wrong. So I don't want people to think, well, I don't need a logo now. You definitely need a logo, but you have to address it as a brand identity, not a logo. When people say logo, you're limiting. It's almost like having a limiting belief and just saying, I want to create a logo. Technically it is a correct term, but saying brand identity gives it more power. Saying brand identity then says, okay, well, I'm going to go from logo to creating a landing page, to then getting my social media done, to getting digital marketing, to having more in place. So the brand essentially is, as I said, it's a journey. You have to think of it as a journey. It is nothing to do with just the brand colors, the brand palette, what font you use or what images you use. Those are all brand image, but the brand itself is a lot more than that. It's complete communication.
Why would you say branding is important?
Well, it's going to help you. It's going to help you stand out. It's going to help you, which a lot of people may have heard before. But it will essentially help you discover the right audience and the right clientele. It's gonna help you narrow down to the right demographic. So when people say, "Well, I'm looking for everybody," then that means you're never going to find anybody. So the more you define the brand, it's going to help you define the audience.
So where does marketing play into that? Because if I speak to marketers would generally say it all depends how you market your product, service or whatever. And they'll also say similar to what you said, if you're going to market to everyone, you're going to find no one, sort of thing. So is there a differentiation between marketing and branding, or do they go hand in hand? If someone's just listening and thinking, hang on a second, I spoke to a marketer who said something similar last week. You're saying branding is very, very similar.
Yeah, well, I think marketing, marketing is an arm of it. I wouldn't say it's the same as branding. So when you talk about marketing, you're almost falling into like PR, public relations. So I think marketing is how the brand is represented, or how it can be associated, or where it can be implemented. So when you create the brand, and I don't think you can ever stop creating or evolving a brand. And when people say, well, I've got a logo now, I've got a website, I'm getting sales, that's it, I don't need anything else. It's like, well, your brand is going to fall behind very easily, because if you don't nurture it, and if you don't develop it, and if you don't look after it, you'll lose sight of the brand, and the brand will almost become something that you didn't want it to.
It's interesting you said that your brand's going to fall behind, because one of the frustrations that I find in this modern day is, and whether it's branding, whether it's marketing, is that there's just so many avenues, there's so many platforms, especially when you look at social media. I find it so frustrating that first I thought, okay, LinkedIn was great. Then there's like people are saying, well, why are you not on Facebook or Twitter and Instagram? Now TikTok's. I just feel like TikTok's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then there's YouTube and all of that sort of stuff. And I want to talk about this later around this. I just find it so frustrating that there's just so many platforms, so many, whether it's online or offline sort of thing. How do you find that niche? Generally, where do you just decide to say, actually, I'm just going to stick to here?
I think you've got to identify what your audience is. You've got to narrow down your demographic, because you're absolutely right. People will create a brand and they'll say, right, I want to get a website done or landing page, and then I want to get my Facebook done. Oh, and then I'll get my Twitter done, and then I'll get my LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Pinterest. Like they'll want to attack everything, and the problem with that is they don't end up making progress on anything. So my biggest advice to people is focus on 2 platforms initially, and then work out, okay, how can you maximize those 2 platforms first? Because otherwise, if you end up doing 6 to 8 platforms, 10, so for example, if you've got Facebook and Instagram, those 2 are pretty much closely linked, because you can cross share across each platform, and so you can automate a lot of things across Facebook and Instagram. But if you're somebody who's doing more video-based content, then look at YouTube, and you can still automate between Facebook and YouTube, and there's going to be advantages, between 2 platforms and how you can share those. But what I say to people is definitely don't do it because of pressure. You might see a competitor doing TikTok. It doesn't mean you have to do it, because they might be doing it in a way which is going to be promoting a certain product, or maybe they've just started it, or they may not be doing as well as you think, and then all of a sudden you're going to do it, and then you'll think, oh well, I have to do it. It's like, so there can be that bit of brand pressure from rivals or competitors as well.
You mentioned a couple of times when you're saying about a brand, about you should know your market, your audience, who you're trying to target, sort of thing. So if someone's listening and thinking, okay, you know what, I'm starting off, or actually I need to refresh, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got a certain demographic. So let's say they might say, my demographic is going to be 16 to 25 year olds, for example, whatever the product might be or whatever. So when it comes to branding, what considerations do you make? So this is the fascinating thing. What makes a logo, or what makes a brand that talks to 16 to 25 year olds? What would they need to look into? And what I mean by that is, are there certain shapes? Are there certain colours? Are there certain words? Are there certain things that you would say, what should a business look at to say, well, okay, using these sort of things, people should hopefully know that I'm attributing my brand to that demographic?
Yes, I think psychology is a big one in this. So to understand or to aim a brand towards an audience, you've almost got to immerse yourself in that audience, and you've almost got to think like a 16 to 25 year old.
Yeah.
So if you think about that audience now, 16 to 25 year olds, they're gonna go for the newer pieces of content on social media. They're gonna look at. They're pretty much the smartphone generation, the iPhone, Android generation. They're going to go to their phones straight away. So you think about digital now and the way that's adapting. You've got to think about, okay, well, all right, colors for that audience, and there is a color psychologist chart which is really important when it comes to branding. So I'd say vibrant colors are gonna definitely appeal, especially to the that younger generation. Same with fonts. You're gonna go for softer looking fonts rather than anything like hard or formal looking. So like we want to avoid fonts like Comic Sans, Times New Roman, Arial, the typical Microsoft sort of package fonts. Like you want to stay away from those, and you want to look at it in the sense that, okay, what would that audience respond to? It's all about responsiveness, and it's all about engagement, not essentially, okay, well, this is what I think they'll like, or because when I was 16 to 25, 10 years ago in the 90s, 80s, 70s and all that, you've got to look at it like right now, what is happening right now. And I think the biggest thing, the biggest way of finding out is if you've got kids, nephews, nieces, cousins or whatever, or basically do your research, do your market research, and look at, right, where are they hanging out, what are they looking at, what sort of brands right now are hot in that sort of in that bracket.
From your experience, do you think businesses do that enough, or they don't? It's a bit of trial and error or test, or...
I think you've always got to test. I think you always have to test, and I mean, the amount of iterations that brands go through with their logos, you may not see it because there's a lot of like big launches nowadays with things, or things you hear of things through referrals or recommendations or social media. But I'm pretty certain that brands will go through so much testing, beta testing. They'll go through so many versions of their apps. They'll go through so many versions of their landing pages, and it's just trial and error, and they take years. Under the radar, they will spend a lot of time. But once they work out the formula, once they've nailed down what works, then it's a case of, okay, you focus on that, and then you just have to keep strengthening and developing on that one area.
Interesting. It is quite fascinating, like you said. It is quite interesting because I reflect and I look at what branding I mean, I've recently started concentrating on my personal brand, which we'll talk about after the break, because I find that whole concept more interesting because it's you. But then, how again, some people might not like you or whatever, even though that's the audience that you want to go for. You put, and it's a bit more braver as well, isn't it? I would think, putting yourself out there, because that is you. Whereas with certain brands, logos or concepts, you're hidden behind it, aren't you?
You are, but I do also think that from a company's point of view and from a corporate point of view, you're gonna have people who just don't like a brand for a color, or don't like a company for a font. They don't like it because they may have supported a cause or something in the news that's all of a sudden controversial, and they don't want to. They don't want to. They don't want to associate or be related to that movement or whatever. So I think branding is as much as it is powerful, and it is a must for any business. There is such a raw sensitivity nowadays with branding, in that anything that a brand does now, it's like it has to be so carefully thought about. Everything has to be vetted and reviewed. And you look at social media, a brand can be destroyed within seconds of something that they might have shared on social media, the way they respond to a customer, on a feedback thread or something. It's really important, to get that language and there's a word that I mentioned before, communication. It is pure communication, but the emotion that a brand can drive on the other end, the way that brands grow and nurture themselves is, you've got to find emotional connection with the audience. Which is why a lot of brands now, you look at how brands are re-evolving, or they've reconnected in some way because they've gone back to their heritage, 70s, 80s. Like, look at Burger King, they've gone back to the mid 70s design of their packaging, and all of a sudden, they've drawn. They've recouped some of the kind of
of the older ones,
some of the older generation, because they've connected to their roots and history, and I think so it's that's just one example, but as I mentioned, brands are so powerful nowadays that you don't even think about it. You will say words like Coke and Hoover just off the top of your head without even thinking about it.
Okay, wicked. We'll explore that just after the break. So, guys, you're listening to the Business Hour here with Rashid. I've got Zoheb Sadiq, who's a graphic design, visual marketing. What was it? Sorry, visual marketing expert. Talking about branding. Stay with us after the break, and we'll be continuing our conversation there. Welcome back to the Business Hour. You're listening to me, Rashid, and I have with me today Zoheb Sadiq, who's qualified in graphic design, visual marketing, and what we've been talking for the first part of the show is about branding. Now, you mentioned, Zoheb, just before the break that, branding is so powerful. So if I'm a startup business or any type of business, what makes a successful brand?
So there's various elements that make a successful brand. So I'm going to break it into a couple of stages here. So I mentioned before the break that a brand is not defined by its logo. And the reason I say that is because your brand, essentially, and if you're starting out in business, if you're an existing business owner, if you've been in business 15, 20, 30, 50 years, it's irrelevant, really, because your brand is a complete representation and an attachment of yourself. So whether you're the MD, whether you're the executive director, whether you're a department manager, whether you're just a plain employee, you are carrying and wearing the brand every single day. Self-employed, employed, part-time, whatever it is, So the way that brand has built and evolved is as I said, there quite a few layers to it. I know we're short on time here, or we're on limited time. But to be a successful brand, you have to keep pushing. Essentially, you have to keep pushing. So when you start the brand, you're gonna have a logo, landing page, website. You're gonna have a bit of social media, and that's absolutely fine. By the way, because I meet a lot of people who say, "But do I not need paid advertising? Do I not need to spend £5,000 on Facebook every month? Do I not need Google advertising, SEO, PPC?" And the short of it is no, not at that stage, because money comes and goes. You can spend money on all these different things, of course you can, but you've got to get the foundations right. So successful brands are built on a solid foundation. So what are you selling, or what is your product or service? What's your USP? But it's not just about unique selling point. It's about what is it that, in your opinion, is better than anything else? Whether it's a rival, a non-rival, what is it that you do that you think is just going to blow people out of the water? That is an irresistible product or service. And then it's working on, you can have multiple services, of course you can, and I don't want to discourage that from anybody, but you have to have one core service or product that is going to be your bread and butter. And once you get that right, once you get the audience for it, once you have return customers, once you have a loyal following and people who are, once you've captured the trust of people, and that's a big word by the way, brands are built on trust, and you use that trust. So think of the trust as a cement for the foundations. So the more you layer that trust, you're building stronger foundations every time, and you're essentially building. And the higher you get, you want to go higher. You want to keep pushing. Don't stay in your comfort zone. You want to keep growing and growing and growing, because the brands that stay in their comfort zones are essentially the ones that will never move. They will always want to stay cushy and comfortable. But the truth of it is, other brands will come along similar to them, better than them, and then they'll be forgotten about in an instant.
A lot of stuff you said there signifies longevity. Yeah. So part of that longevity, at what stage would you say? I mean, how long would it take to establish a brand? How long are you talking? I don't know. I mean, I know that's probably a very loaded question. But at what stage could a business say, or the market could say, okay, that is an established brand? And then obviously you then take it in layers after that, and it will be, okay, how do they elevate that brand, etc., etc. But roughly if someone's doing it consistently, like you said, pushing it, what time frame are you looking at that people would say, yeah, that's an established brand now?
Yeah, I would say 3 years is a fair reflection on saying that you're an established brand. But by saying 3 years, it also means that after 3 years, your products will have changed. It may have taken a different angle. Your premises might have changed. Your staff might have changed. You might have grown, in your staff and in your team. Your online presence might have changed as well. A lot of things will change, but they'll change because they'll have developed. So I think as things develop, they're only going to get better. They're only going to get stronger. But then they'll hit a point where you'll think about wanting to refresh the brand, and refreshing because it's going to be in line with your new mission and your new objective. And that's a big one here, to say, like, when to have a strong objective and a strong mission and vision from the very start is absolutely crucial. Because, so as an example, a company may say they want to be, they want to be the biggest car garage or car servicing dealership in the Midlands. They may want to offer, they might want to do a low ticket offer, which is going to then entice people into buying higher value products. And there's no reason why that can't be achievable. And I think, brands in the early days, when they're starting out, they have to have that belief and it's mental resilience to the point where it's like, right, okay, mental strength and resilience and self-belief where it's like, right, we can do this. There's no reason, because every major brand did that. You talk about all the major brands now. They had an idea, a solid idea and a solid vision that they've focused on it, they've nurtured it, they have then extended it to the point where, right, they become a household name, and they become almost becomes part of spoken English. The brand name, the products, the way that people respond to those, to those brands, it becomes part of everyday life. It becomes part of culture. I think everybody has brands that we can associate with as part of their culture. So yeah, having a mission, objective, long-term vision is absolutely crucial. So when you get to that 3 years, you'll think about, right, okay, I want to refresh the brand. You might want to tweak the logo. You might want to have it more in line with what you're doing. Yeah.
With refreshing the brand, I've always thought, and this is just my thinking, is I've always taken as a brand refresh is you're struggling as a business or a brand, you're struggling, or you've had some feedback that what you're doing isn't working, or they might have, I don't know, is that the right approach, or is that just something that people might say, actually we want to, or is it an element of, okay, look, we don't want to stay behind, or we don't want to be left behind, or actually we think there's a new market to tap into, or like you said, there might be a new vision to go through. Why would someone go through a brand refresh in your experience?
There's multiple reasons. I mean, so there might be the reason that a brand has suffered, some controversy in the media, or they've had a difficult time, with the industry they're in, or on the other side, they might be responding to current trends. So, for example, I mentioned social media. I mentioned the digital world now, where everything now is becoming simpler. Brands are pretty much now going back to a 2D sort of style with their logos. You look at a lot of brands now, they're stripping colours down. They're going for more of a 1 to 2 colour sort of basis. So it's sometimes it's just simplifying, but simplifying means that you're reconnecting as well, and so it's definitely not. I think a refresh has to be carefully thought about. So I wouldn't refresh just because you're going through a hard time, or because you just want to refresh, because then there's no reason to it, and you might end up actually losing more of your audience than you were trying to regain, or find a new audience. So
you've mentioned there's a trust element with brands. People build an emotional attachment, a trust with a brand. Some brands, to either enhance that trust or build that trust, may use celebrities, or recently they might use these influencers or whatever. What's the thinking behind a branding company or a business wanting to do that? I mean, what's your thoughts on using celebrities or influencers or anything like that to enhance your brand?
I think the way that social media has evolved, and the way that it is still evolving, and I don't think we'll ever see the back of it, unless something else comes into the market. But I think with how strong social media is, and how people are constantly on it, so I think it's the audience that most brands want to reach out to now. And if you look at influencers and what they're doing, so people on Instagram and TikTok, for example, I'd say are the two biggest ones, and YouTube. Let's throw that in there. But video-based social media platforms are essentially now they're utilizing and I suppose if you like, they're harnessing the kind of untapped potential or individuals. So,
Isn't there a risk? I always thought of it as a bit of a risk, because if you've created a brand and you've then identified a celebrity or an influencer to say, okay, I think your characteristics, your behaviours, what you stand for match our brand. But then somewhere down the line, that influencer or that celebrity is caught up in some controversy. They're caught up into, some sort of scandal or whatever. Isn't that the risk then? Okay,
Well,
all of a sudden your brand might be now attached to that.
Well, absolutely, but I think you've also got to think of it as. I think that's a risk that's going to be present right from the start, and I think there's always going to be a risk, no matter what you do in branding. So there's going to be a risk attached to your landing page, to your website, to your social media profiles, to your advertising, to your paid campaigns. I think there's going to be a risk with anything, and the same. An influencer is essentially an extension of the brand, but I think also it's managing the behavior of it, and it's also you have to manage it in a way where you've got to protect the brand. So if there's going to be controversy, and if there's going to be something that doesn't sit right, all of a sudden gets negative press or feedback, or that influencer's been caught up, as you said, in something in the news, or they've done something to upset people, then you've got to make that conscious decision as the brand director or the MD or the marketing manager to say, okay, well, we need to address this, because all of a sudden that audience that you've spent years building could be jeopardized, in an instant.
From your experience, people say, sometimes people say any marketing is good marketing. Bad marketing is still good publicity or whatever. What's your thoughts on when it comes to brands that, any controversy or a brand being controversial or a bit out of the norm, if it's got people talking about us, do people say, well, it's got our brand in the limelight? What's your thoughts on that? Because I would look at it as, you're in the limelight, and I think personally 9 times out of 10 people probably wouldn't care that much, and I don't think people would move away from a brand at mass. I don't know. That's just my feeling on it.
I think that if you can avoid sensitivity, if you can avoid, there's controversy in the I think there's two ways of looking at it. Like you said, there's controversy in the sense that if it's thought provoking, it's not a bad thing. If it starts to get to the point where you start to associate or mention or incite religious and political views, I think that's when you run into trouble. And we've had it with, I don't want to name any particular brands, but I've heard cases where a soft drink can all of a sudden can evoke Islamic people to think that it replicates or that it represents Arabic scriptures, for example. But that's one person's opinion, but it just takes one post on social media or a community or a group of people or a retweet or a hashtag movement to then really damage that brand, in the sense that, and they may not lose sales, or they may not lose a lot of things, but it's the trust and the credibility that's going to be affected most instantly. And I do believe that that's the first thing that brands have to think about. Are they going to prioritize? Yes, as a company, you're going to prioritize sales and revenue and targets, and you've got to keep everyone happy. But at the same time, it's your audience really it's your audience that you need to sustain.
Personal branding.
Yeah.
What personal branding? I think, I don't know whether it's a concept that's always been there, but I feel like it's more prevalent now. Me personally, I'm trying to look at personal branding from a different view as well. How does personal branding differ to, like you said, a logo and all of the other sort of elements of branding? Because it's a big risk, because essentially it's you. It's you. You're there, whether you're the face of the website, social media, billboards, wherever, these digital screens or whatever. How can someone really elevate their personal brand? And can it be in conjunction? Can it be side by side with, let's say, a logo? Those sort of your general branding elements.
Yeah, I mean, so personal branding, you're right. It is a risk, but I think you've got to counter that risk by thinking that, you know what, I'm putting myself on the line. I'm being courageous here. I'm going to use the attributes that I've got to formulate that brand, and I'm gonna take those values, and I'm gonna spread a message. I'm gonna communicate with those values and align with the right people. But it's, as you said, it's yes, it is a risk. You're putting yourself on the line. Your face, your name, your reputation, everything that you stand for is all of a sudden is becoming this brand.
The spotlight, isn't it?
Yeah. You are the brand. But again, just like a company would do their branding, just how a company goes through the stages and goes through the motions of their brand and getting it right, a personal brand has to do exactly the same thing. And I don't think there's any shortcuts by saying, well, I'm a public speaker, or I'm, I've done this in my life, or I've done that. It's like, nobody really cares. It's more about, right, okay, well, what is it that it's about, like, what is it that connects me to you? That's what the audience is thinking, and the best examples of personal brands that I've come across are the types of people that I resonate with, essentially. And I'll stay loyal to them because I know that every time I see their material or their content, it's gonna keep feeding me.
Could resonation even be as small as we both support the same football team, or we're both from the same area, or whatever? It could just be as little as that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think, there's that. It has to be that kind of like. Has to be that commonality. Has to be that sort of like, oh, okay, like you can see yourself almost within that person a little bit. Yeah. You feel as if like you're part of them. You feel like that you wouldn't even have to really meet them to feel as if like, oh, okay, like it's somebody that you'd follow just without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, mentioned influencers on social media. Now it's a similar thing. It's like, and I suppose really you can connect it back to that, where if companies are using influencers, it means that those companies have essentially they've trusted those influencers because they align with them, or that influencer aligns with the values of that company. And in the same way, an influencer is a personal brand. So you're aligning yourself to an influencer. So, but there's so many different ways of looking at that.
Quickly, where do you see the future of branding? How do you think companies will need to adapt or evolve their brand for, let's say, the rest of 2022? What trends do you see, or what would you advise businesses to say, look, to enhance your brand or to grow your brand or to start your brand, this is what you could do for the next 12 months?
Yeah, I'd say digital is, which might sound really predictable, but digital is here to stay. And I think what we've seen in the last 18 months to 2 years, it's like everything has gone online now. Everything's remote. Everything is accessible so easily. So I would say, the way that brands come across digitally is so important now. And when I say digitally, I don't mean by saying, well, run out and get an app made for your business. That's not what I mean. It's like, if an app is something that you think is going to benefit your customers and your audience, yeah, fine, okay. You can do that. You can experiment with it. As I mentioned, testing is important, but it's testing in the sense that, okay, do you think that's necessary? But the way that branding is evolving now, it's going digital. But also, what I'm finding with brands now, it's going digital, but also, I mentioned earlier, reconnecting with the roots of your business. Now, I spoke about companies such as fast food chains or established businesses who have gone back to their roots of the 70s and 80s and earlier
recycling,
decades.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
Recycling.
So not every business will have that luxury of doing that. But if you're a business which is, let's say, a year, 2, 3, 5 years old, let's say, for example, it's having that personal touch, and this is where social media is really important, and not forgetting that social media doesn't just mean posting something out at 7 o'clock on 5 different platforms and saying, right, that's it. I'm gonna let it just do that work.
I'm done here.
It's having that personal connection to your audience. So if you can be the face of your business, if you've got a team behind you, if you can almost, if you can connect with your audience in the way that you're personalizing your brand, that is major. That is so important, and that's essentially why platforms like TikTok are doing well right now, because people are just literally showing up on camera, pressing record. They may do a silly dance, they may do some singing or a meme type video, but it's working because it's connecting to to that audience.
So, thank you very, very much. I mean, time's flown by. Lastly, bit about yourself. So if people who are listening would like to connect with you, how can they get in touch with you?
So I'm pretty much available on all social media channels. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I do have a few other sort of
so how can they find you?
Well.
How can they find you on those? Are you as Zoheb Sadiq?
Yeah, so if you type in Zoheb Sadiq, Zoheb Sadiq, Sadiq.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zo, for your time today.
Thank you too.
Guys, you've been listening to the Business Hour with me, Umar Rashid. Had Zoheb Sadiq on today. If you just caught the back end of this episode and you'd like to listen to it full, it will be repeated again on Unity FM here on Saturday at 5 o'clock. Alternatively, you can listen on the Unity FM website. You can also visit my YouTube channel at Umar Rashid HR, where you can listen to this episode as well as previous episodes as well. Please do follow and connect with me on other social media platforms such as LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Again, my handle for all of those is at Umar Rashid HR. Please do get in touch. Please provide feedback. If you'd like to come on the show, please message and inshallah we can make that happen. Till next time, please inshallah tune in again next Tuesday 6 o'clock, where we'll be back with another amazing guest. Until then, take care and assalamu alaikum.